Please step over there, Mr. McCarty. Raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence I give upon this hearing by the Senate of Texas of impeachment charges against Warren Kenneth Paxton Jr. shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. Please be seated. And is that stack of papers there from the last witness?
It must be.
Okay, let me pick those up. And as closely as you can speak on the microphone, you might want to raise that. You're a little taller, just a little bit. There you go. Mr. DeGuerin, your witness.
Mr. McCarty, we've had trouble with the sound in here, so please get close to the microphone.
Absolutely.
And tell the senators your name, please.
My name is Darren McCarty.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a lawyer.
Give us the benefit of a brief statement of your training and experience.
After law school, I clerked for Karen Williams on the United States Federal Court of Appeals, the Fourth Circuit. After that, I went to work for Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher in Dallas. I did do a couple of stints at smaller firms and sort of finished my original stint in private practice at Alston & Bird's Dallas office. Actually helped found that office. And then after that, I came to the Attorney General's office.
What year did you come to the, month and year did you come to the Attorney General's office?
I believe it was maybe late April, early May of 17.
And how did you get that job?
Jeff Mateer, who was the first assistant at the time, was somebody that I had known, I had met, actually working as an intern for Congressman Dick Armey in D.C. when we were both quite young. I think I was 17 or 18 years old, and I think Jeff was a couple of years older than that. We lost touch over time, but got reacquainted because we were both doing pro bono work on religious freedom cases. You know, sort of kept up our friendship, et cetera. And when he took the job here, he initially approached me. I initially declined because I just had a lot of things going on at the time. I couldn't move to Austin. But then eventually, maybe 6-8 months later, recontacted him, or he recontacted me, something like that.
And when did you first meet Ken Paxton?
When I was interviewing.
And did General Paxton interview you himself?
He did.
Okay. It may not matter, but are you a rhino, a Republican in name only?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I think I started out when I was in 8th grade of my own volition, hanging door hangers for Ronald Reagan, and was a youth delegate of the Republican National Convention. I took a semester off of college to help staff a congressional campaign. It was actually the last campaign of a Republican against Jim Wright before he stepped down from his congressional office. And then, you know, I continued working sort of in politics while I was at the University of Texas. I think I was the press secretary for the University of Republicans, and yeah, it's what I've been for a long time.
Okay, could we have the organizational chart up, please? I want to put on the screen in front of you and in front of the senators the organizational chart of the Office of the Attorney General. Highlighted to the far right of the chart is your name and photograph. What was your role in the year of 2020 in the Attorney General's office?
I was a Deputy Attorney General for Civil Litigation. In that role, I oversaw all of the civil litigation for the office. I think it was 12 divisions, roughly 325 attorneys, and I think total personnel somewhere north of 600.
Among those duties, among those responsibilities, was the charitable trust division within your purview?
Yes, it was the Financial Litigation and Charitable Trust Division.
And briefly, what is the Attorney General's role statutorily with regard to charitable trusts, charitable foundations?
Very briefly, the Attorney General sort of has broad powers to protect the public interest in charity.
The public interest in a charity, does that sometime include protecting a charity from attacks from without?
Absolutely.
And does it sometimes include protecting a charity from itself or from mismanagement?
Yeah, from breaches of fiduciary duties, some sort of mismanagement, yes.
Is there a requirement under Texas law that when a lawsuit involving a charity occurs that the Attorney General is to get notice of that lawsuit?
Yes.
What does the Attorney General do then? What does your Charitable Trust Division do then when given notice?
They look at the lawsuit and, do some investigation to determine whether the charity is qualified to protect itself and is protecting itself. In other words, if there's some sort of mismanagement issue at the charity, or there's some inability to legally represent itself, the charity in the litigation, that might be a place where the Attorney General's office steps in to protect the charity.
Give us a rough estimate of how many charitable trusts exist in the state of Texas, if you know.
I do not. Quite a number.
Is it in the hundreds of thousands?
That would not surprise me.
Okay.
Yes,
and give us a rough estimate, if you will, of how many times the Attorney General's office, let's say in a year, involves itself in some way in a charitable trust litigation.
It's a handful.
A handful.
At most.
Okay.
So it may be, again, it may be a management problem. Sometimes charitable trusts, are falling into a state where they sort of can't be self-sustaining anymore, et cetera. And so, the AG's office will get involved, but it's not a common occurrence.
What procedure does the Attorney General's office go through to determine whether to involve itself in litigation involving a charitable trust?
Well, first, the Financial Litigation and Charitable Trust Division, as it was organized then, they have a group, obviously, within that looks at charitable trusts. So they analyze the situation. They make, the staff attorney will make a recommendation, I think initially to the head of the charitable trust group within the division, as to whether to intervene or not. And then that's sort of, if it's a non-intervention, typically it sort of stops at the division level. It won't necessarily come up to me unless they think it's a close call and they would need someone in my role's advice. If that's not the case and they believe that they should intervene in the case, then there would be an executive approval memorandum, and that would be signed off on. That would be signed off by the division chief. It would be signed off by me. I believe it would have been signed off by the deputy first assistant attorney general and also by the first assistant.
I want to ask you some questions about the Mitte Foundation and some litigation involving the Mitte Foundation and Nate Paul are world-class holdings. You're familiar now with that litigation, aren't you?
Of course, yes.
We do not have an agreement on Exhibit 54, but I'm going to hand you Exhibit 54 and ask that it be introduced once he identifies it, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Any objections from the,
No, Your Honor. We'll allow this.
we'll admit Exhibit 054 into evidence.
will you pull that up, please? I want to direct your attention to the first paragraph of this memo. First, what is the memo?
This looks like a memorandum that recommends, I shouldn't say it looks like, it is a recommendation by...
Keep your voice up and get close to the microphone.
I'm sorry, I was busy trying to read this. This appears to be the memorandum that
I'm sorry, it is on the screen if that's easier for you.
Okay, that is easier, thank you. This is the memorandum that declined to involve, for the AG's office to become involved with the Mitte Foundation. So this would have been prepared at the division level, and highly unlikely that it would have come to me initially.
All right. I want to draw your attention to the first paragraph, and I'll just read it as you look at it. If you'll highlight that first paragraph. I recommend waiving the Attorney General's interest in this matter regarding a private real estate company's breach of fiduciary duties to its investors, one of which is a charitable trust, the Mitte Foundation. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
And that's a memoranda recommending to waive the Attorney General's interest.
That's correct.
On the second side of that letter, if you go to the second page, I want to highlight the paragraph in the middle, in my opinion, starting there.
I see that.
This office does not have a role in this matter. The trust is zealously represented by counsel. Counsel stated that once the receiver sells the First and Trinity LP and WC Third and Congress LP, the trust will likely make a massive return on its investment. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
And finally, at the bottom, I recommend the Attorney General file a waiver for the following reasons. The trust is represented by counsel, the trust's assets are diversified, and the litigation will not critically impact the trust's 2020 distributions. Is that right?
Yes, that's how it reads.
Following this, did the Attorney General waive filing any, waive interfering in this lawsuit?
Yes, we did not intervene in January or around that time frame of 2020.
Pull up Exhibit 55, please. I believe this is agreed. Entered by agreement. This is the Attorney General's waiver, isn't it? Filed in the lawsuit, styled the Mitte Foundation against WC and Trinity, so forth, the world-class, or Nate Paul's organizations.
That's correct.
I want to highlight at the bottom of that first page of the waiver, if any pleading is filed herein that adds additional parties or causes of action, then that would constitute new or additional proceeding, and then the Attorney General might intervene, correct?
That's correct.
Did any new parties, additional parties, or additional causes of actions ever get filed in that case?
I certainly don't recall any new parties, and I was not aware of any additional causes of action.
Did General Paxton order that an intervention be made?
Well, yes.
Let me ask you this way. Did you have a conversation with General Paxton in which he expressed his request or order that
Yeah.
the intervention be made?
Yes, I did. So General Paxton eventually came to me, and this was my first involvement with this case, substantive involvement, right? There are 34,000 matters.
Okay.
Okay,
So
open.
let me get it this way.
Yeah.
Was this on your radar screen at first?
No.
How did it get on your radar screen?
It got on my radar screen because General Paxton particularly wanted to intervene in this matter. I don't think my first discussion about this matter was with General Paxton. I think it was probably with Jeff Mateer. But at some point soon thereafter, I had a meeting with General Paxton, and he expressed a high level of interest and some insistence that we should intervene in this matter.
In your experience, had General Paxton ever expressed interest in any litigation involving charitable trusts that the Attorney General was involved in? Attorney General's
Objection, Your
office.
Honor, that's speculation.
Sustained.
Had there been any other litigation involving charitable trusts that you'd had any conversations with Paxton, General Paxton about?
I did not.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There were not, no. I had no other conversations about any other charitable
So did you, what was your thought about General Paxton getting involved in this litigation?
I did think it was unusual at the time.
I'm sorry?
I did believe that was unusual at the time. And that's probably all I thought about it at the time. We had so much going on in my divisions at that time with COVID and the Google lawsuit, et cetera. I did not spend a great deal of time thinking about it other than sort of a mental note that was out of the ordinary.
All right. So at any rate, did the Attorney General's office file an intervention in that lawsuit?
We did.
At the time it was filed, do you rely on advice from your staff of attorneys that generally have hands-on handling of the litigation for advice?
Of course, I always
If we could have
sought
the
advice for them.
organization chart again, please. Down the list of people under you, there is a Joshua Godby. Who is he?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, Mr. DeGuerin. Our screen shows the previous document. I'm not sure why that is.
I think you've got a glitch over there.
Clearly.
We have the correct,
I can tell the court reporter does, but for some reason, our table has something completely different. And I'm not trying to take away your time. I'm not trying to take the man's time.
we'll pause the clock for a moment.
Literally just our table.
It's just our table that keeps doing this. I'm not suggesting a conspiracy, Your Honor. I'm just saying it's happening.
Are the rest of the tables of your attorneys have the right screen? Damien will come to the rescue.
Okay.
It looks like the senators have the right one. I'd request an extra 15 minutes for this delay.
I bet you could negotiate him down to 1.
We've given you 6 more minutes today, so. Plus we saved you 5, so you're 11 minutes to the good.
Mine's still just frozen up.
Mr. DeGuerin? Mr. DeGuerin? Busby. Members, we're going to take this is the last witness of the day, but there's still more questions and cross. So let's take just a quick 10-minute break here, not our normal longer break, and then we may be finished by a little earlier this evening. So 10 minutes, come back at 20 minutes before the hour of 6.
Mr. President? Oh. Okay.
Perfect setup. It's the perfect green.